Welcome, true crime enthusiasts, to episode 3 of the Maple Murders podcast. Today, we delve into one of Canada's most notorious and disturbing cases, a chilling tale of deception that captivated a nation and exposed the terrifying truth behind a seemingly perfect facade. Prepare yourselves, because we're about to uncover the dark story of the Ken and Barbie Killers. On the surface, they were Ken and Barbie, young, attractive, and the very picture of perfection. But hidden away in their charming home was a collection of videotapes. These tapes didn't capture birthdays or holidays. They documented a series of unspeakable horrors, and they would expose one of the most monstrous couples in criminal history, Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. This is the story of how their fairy tale life crumbled, and how the evidence they filmed themselves became the key to unlocking their depraved reality. Flip through a photo album from the late 80s and early 90s, and you'd see a storybook romance. There's Paul Bernardo, with his chiseled good looks and charismatic smile, and right beside him, Karla Homolka, bubbly, beautiful, and completely smitten. Their 1991 wedding photos look like something out of a fairy tale. A gorgeous bride, a handsome groom, both beaming with what looked like pure joy. To the world, they were the definition of success. They lived in a pristine home in Port Dalhousie, a picturesque community in St. Catharines, Ontario. They drove nice cars, had friends, and presented a perfectly united front. They were so visually perfect that people literally called them the Ken and Barbie of Port Dalhousie. Paul was a respectable accountant, and Karla was a veterinary assistant, a job that suggested a gentle, caring soul. They hosted parties, went on vacation, and seemed to be living a life anyone would envy. They were the couple that had it all. But this carefully built image, it was a lie, a mask, the chillingly effective camouflage to hide the rot festering just beneath the surface. The charming smiles in the photos were the same smiles they wore while committing acts of unimaginable cruelty. Their idyllic home wasn't a sanctuary. It was a dungeon. And their life together wasn't a romance, but a spiral into a shared madness of sadism and murder. The truth was far more terrifying than anyone could imagine, and it would take their own home videos to finally rip the mask off and show the world the monsters underneath. To understand how a partnership this monstrous could even happen, we have to go back to 1987. Paul Bernardo wasn't just some guy trying to make it as an accountant. He was already a predator. Between 1987 and 1990, a shadow fell over the Scarborough district of Toronto. A man, soon known as the Scarborough Rapist, was attacking women with terrifying efficiency. He was bold, striking in homes and public spaces, and his violence was getting worse. He was responsible for at least 19 sexual assaults, leaving a community paralyzed with fear. This was the man Karla Homolka met at a hotel convention in October 1987. She was only 17. He was 23. From the very beginning, their relationship was intense, almost obsessive. Paul showered Karla with attention, but it was an affection laced with control and a dark, manipulative streak. He was charismatic, confident, and Karla seemed utterly captivated. She fell under his spell fast, and their bond wasn't cemented by love, but by a shared, twisted interest in deviant sexual fantasies. Bernardo, the seasoned serial rapist, had found something new, a partner. He discovered that Karla didn't just tolerate his dark desires. She seemed to embrace them. The abuse started early. Paul was physically violent with Karla, but that violence became tangled up in their sex life in a deeply disturbing way. Some experts later described their relationship as a folie à deux, a French term meaning a madness of two. It's a rare syndrome where two people share the same delusion. One person, usually the more dominant one, imposes their twisted worldview on the other. For Paul and Karla, that shared delusion was a world with no consequences, where they could act out their sickest impulses. His sadism found a stage in her, and her own narcissistic traits found an outlet through him. They didn't just tolerate each other's darkness, they amplified it. Their relationship became an echo chamber of depravity, each one pushing the other further down the spiral. Karla was far from a passive victim. She would later claim she was forced, that she lived in constant fear of Paul, a claim that became the most controversial part of this whole story. But her actions told a very different story. She wasn't just there for the horrors. She was a facilitator, an instigator, and a co-conspirator. The perfect couple was actually a perfectly symbiotic killing machine. Their shared fantasies were about to spill out into the real world, and the first person they would drag into their nightmare would be someone terrifyingly close to home. Christmas is supposed to be about family and joy. For the Homolka family, Christmas of 1990 would forever mark an unimaginable tragedy, one they wouldn't fully understand for years. At the center of it was Karla's own younger sister, Tammy Homolka. At 15, Tammy was a bright, vibrant kid. She was innocent and trusting, especially when it came to her older sister Karla, who she absolutely adored. That trust was about to be betrayed in the worst way imaginable. On the evening of December 23rd, 1990, 2 days before Christmas, Paul and Karla were at the Homolka family home. The house was full of festive spirit, but the couple had a sinister plan. They wanted to gift Paul a virgin for Christmas. The virgin they chose was Tammy. Their weapon wasn't a gun or a knife. It was a drug cocktail. Karla crushed halcyon, a powerful sedative, into her sister's drink. Then she plied Tammy with alcohol, making sure she was disoriented and weak. Once Tammy was heavily sedated, Paul and Karla carried her down to the basement. What happened next was planned and documented. They had set up a video camera. They gave her more drugs, this time halothane, a powerful anesthetic Karla had stolen from the vet clinic where she worked. As her own sister lay unconscious, Karla helped Paul sexually assault her. They filmed the whole thing, but during the assault, the fantasy turned deadly. Tammy began to choke on her own vomit, and she stopped breathing. Panic set in, but it was a cold, calculated panic. They tried CPR, likely just to build their cover story. It was too late. Tammy Homolka was dead. Their immediate concern wasn't for the dead girl, but for themselves. They meticulously cleaned the scene, hiding any evidence of the assault. They changed Tammy's clothes and put her back in her bed, making it look like she simply died in her sleep. When their parents found their daughter's lifeless body, they were devastated, plunged into a grief so deep that questioning the details was impossible. Karla played the grieving sister perfectly. She cried. She comforted her parents. She stood by Paul's side as the supportive fiancée. The autopsy completely missed the truth. With no obvious signs of foul play, and with the drugs being hard to detect without a reason to look for them, the coroner ruled Tammy's death an accident. They had committed the perfect crime. They had murdered a child, videotaped it, and gotten away clean. This horrific act didn't tear them apart. It bonded them. It was their ultimate depraved secret, and they were just getting started. The Ken and Barbie Killers had claimed their first victim. Soon, they'd be hunting for more. For 6 months after Tammy's death, things were quiet. Paul and Karla moved into their house on Bayview Drive in Port Dalhousie, a home that would soon become infamous. They planned their wedding, a lavish affair in June 1991. To the outside world, they were a happy couple moving forward from a family tragedy. But beneath the surface, the darkness was growing. The thrill of what they did to Tammy hadn't faded. It had just whetted their appetites. Their next target was Leslie Mahaffy. Leslie was a bright, spirited 14-year-old from Burlington, Ontario. On June 14th, 1991, she went to a wake for a friend who had died in a car crash. After she got home, she snuck outside for a cigarette, a small, teenage act of rebellion. It was in that quiet moment that her path crossed with Paul Bernardo's. Bernardo, who was likely out hunting, pulled up and pretended to be lost. It was a classic predator's trick. He lured her to his car, and then the mask dropped. Leslie was abducted. She was taken back to the house on Bayview Drive, where Karla was waiting. For the next 24 to 48 hours, Leslie was held captive in their basement. She was brutally and repeatedly sexually assaulted by both of them, and just like with Tammy, they videotaped it all. The tapes would later show Karla not just participating, but at times looking like an enthusiastic accomplice, destroying any idea that she was just an unwilling victim. At some point, Leslie Mahaffy was murdered. She was strangled with an electrical cord. Now, they had a new problem: how to get rid of a body. Their solution was as cold as their crime. Paul Bernardo used a circular saw to dismember Leslie's body in their basement bathroom. Then, they encased her body parts in blocks of concrete. Over the next few days, they drove to Lake Gibson, a nearby reservoir. Under the cover of darkness, they dumped the concrete blocks into the water, believing their secret was now buried forever. They were wrong. On June 29th, 2 weeks after Leslie vanished, a couple boating on the lake saw a strange block of concrete floating near the shore. When they got closer, their curiosity turned to horror. The police were called, and more blocks were pulled from the lake. Dental records confirmed the unthinkable. The remains belonged to Leslie Mahaffy. The search was over. A homicide investigation had begun. The community was gripped by fear. A monster was out there, a killer who desecrated their victims. And the police had no idea the killers were a handsome young couple, hiding in plain sight. The discovery of Leslie Mahaffy's body sent a wave of panic across southern Ontario. For 10 months, the case went cold. During that time, Paul and Karla kept living their twisted double life, working, socializing, and keeping up the perfect facade. But the pressure of their secrets and Paul's escalating abuse was causing their relationship to crack. Before it all fell apart, though, they would claim one more life. Kristen French was a 15-year-old high school student from St. Catharines. She was on the school rowing team, known for being dedicated and kind. On the afternoon of April 16th, 1992, she was walking home from school along her usual route, which took her past a church parking lot. That's where she saw Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka in their car. They used the same trick. Karla, playing the part of a friendly, helpless woman, held out a map and asked for directions. Kristen, being a kind kid, leaned in to help. In that instant, Bernardo grabbed her and dragged her into the car. A witness saw a struggle and heard a scream, but by the time they realized what was happening, the car was gone. Kristen French had vanished in broad daylight. She was taken back to the house on Bayview Drive and held captive for 3 agonizing days. The torture she endured was the peak of all their depraved fantasies. She was systematically assaulted by both of them, degraded, humiliated, her desperate pleas for her life completely ignored. But through it all, Kristen showed incredible courage. She talked about her family. She tried to reason with them. She never stopped fighting. This, however, only seemed to fuel their sadism. And once again, the video camera was rolling. The tapes captured the full extent of the horror they inflicted on her. They also documented Karla's active role, showing her taunting Kristen and helping Bernardo with the assaults. These tapes would become undeniable proof of her guilt, shattering the battered wife image she would later try to sell. After 3 days of hell, Kristen French was murdered. Like Leslie, she was strangled. They drove her body to a remote area in North Burlington and dumped her in a ditch on the side of a road. On April 30th, 1992, her body was discovered. The news sent another shockwave of terror through the community. 2 teenage girls, abducted and murdered in less than a year. Police now knew they were hunting a serial killer, or killers. A special task force was formed, the Green Ribbon Task Force, named for the ribbons worn in memory of the girls. The investigation kicked into high gear, and the net was slowly closing in on Ken and Barbie. By the end of 1992, the picture-perfect marriage was imploding. The weight of their secrets and the constant violence had turned their home into a pressure cooker. Paul's abuse of Karla had become more frequent and severe. In January 1993, after a particularly brutal beating, something in Karla finally snapped. She left him. She went to the police, not to confess to murder, but to report him for spousal abuse. As she talked to investigators, though, she started revealing more. She told them that her husband, Paul Bernardo, was the Scarborough Rapist. This was a bombshell. But she didn't stop there. She implicated him in the murders of Leslie Mahaffy and Kristen French. The problem? Her story was that she was a battered, terrified wife, forced to go along with it all. She painted herself as just another one of his victims. At this point, investigators had a story from Karla, but very little hard evidence. They didn't know the videotapes existed. Believing her testimony was their only real shot at putting Bernardo away for the murders, they made one of the most controversial deals in Canadian legal history. They offered Karla Homolka a plea bargain. In exchange for her testimony against Paul, she would plead guilty to manslaughter. Her sentence? Just 12 years in prison. It was a deal made in the dark, based on the belief that she was a coerced victim whose help was essential. The media quickly dubbed it the deal with the devil. It was a pragmatic choice made with incomplete information, and that information was about to become terrifyingly complete. The deal was agreed upon. But before Bernardo's trial began, investigators went back for one last search of the house on Bayview Drive. In the master bedroom closet, a lawyer noticed a light fixture looked out of place. They pulled it down, and hidden in the ceiling above, they found them, a stash of high-8 videotapes. As they watched the footage, a sickening realization washed over them. The deal they had locked in was a catastrophic mistake. The tapes showed everything: the drugging and assault of Tammy, the captivity of Leslie Mahaffy, the 3 days of hell Kristen French endured, but most damning of all, they showed Karla Homolka, and she was no terrified victim. On the tapes, she was an active, willing, and sometimes smiling participant. The tapes revealed the truth of their partnership. It was a union of 2 predators. The prosecution was horrified. They had given a shockingly light sentence to a monster. But a deal is a deal. The plea bargain was a binding contract. It couldn't be undone. The discovery of the tapes changed everything for the public, but in the eyes of the law, it changed nothing for Karla Homolka. For Paul Bernardo, it was game over. The tapes were the smoking gun. His 1995 trial became a media circus as the horrifying details of his crimes came out. As promised, Karla Homolka took the stand and testified against him. Even with the tapes waiting in the wings, she stuck to her story of being a battered wife, a masterclass in manipulation. The 6 videotapes were so disturbing that they were shown to the jury in a closed courtroom. The public never saw the footage, but the descriptions that leaked out were nightmarish. The tapes confirmed that Karla had helped plan and carry out the crimes. She helped subdue the victims. She participated in the assaults, and she even operated the camera. Her demeanor wasn't one of fear. It was one of engagement. This evidence sealed Bernardo's fate. He was convicted on all charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison. He was also declared a dangerous offender, making it highly unlikely he will ever be released. For one of the killers, justice was served, but the public outcry was aimed squarely at the other one. The deal with the devil became a national scandal. The Mahaffy and French families had to live with the fact that one of their daughter's killers would serve a shockingly short sentence for her role in their torture and murder. The deal was fiercely debated everywhere. How could the justice system get it so wrong? Why wasn't the deal voided when the new evidence came to light? The answers were legal and deeply unsatisfying. The case sparked calls for major reform in how plea bargains are handled. The public had been told a story about a monster and his victim, only to find out there were 2 monsters all along. In 2005, after serving her full 12-year sentence, Karla Homolka was released from prison. Her release triggered a media frenzy and widespread public fear. She was placed under strict court-ordered conditions, but in the years since, she has tried to build a new life, changing her name and moving several times. Still, her infamy follows her. Every few years, she's spotted somewhere. In Quebec, in the Caribbean, often with a husband and children, and each time, it sparks fresh public outrage. The debate over her guilt rages on. Was she a master manipulator who played the system, or a broken person completely brainwashed by a psychopath? Experts are still divided. Some argue she suffered from battered woman syndrome, while others point to the tapes as proof that she is a psychopath herself and an equal partner in crime. The case of Ken and Barbie is a dark stain on Canadian history. It's a terrifying story about how evil can hide behind a beautiful mask and a chilling reminder of how the justice system can fail. The very tapes they made to relive their monstrous crimes became their undoing, creating a permanent record of the truth they tried so hard to hide. What do you think? Was Karla Homolka a cunning manipulator or a brainwashed victim? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this case as compelling as we did, please subscribe and turn on notifications for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. Thanks for listening.